Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break, but I hope you enjoy even more this second to last session we have for the day today. I will say that we are very blessed, and I feel very honored to present you the panel we have here today to speak about the regulatory environment. We have Madison Lee, the director of the Biopesticides and Pollution Prevention Division in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Then we have Maria Trainer, the executive director of the Registration Management at ABIM, the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medicine Authority. Then we have Carlos Goulart, is the Secretary of Animal and Plant Health for the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock of Brazil. Then we have Saliu Niassi, the coordinator of the African Union Inter-African Phytosanitary Council. And last but not least, we have Eric Ligelois, senior policy officer at the European Commission with DG Sante. When I said that we are lucky today to have the speaker, is also, I think we are lucky because we can see different stages of biocontrol policy in work. There are geographies where a biocontrol policy were implemented in the 1970s, countries where we have seen early implementation in the 2000s with specific regulatory frameworks for biocontrol. And then there are countries that now are actually starting making new frameworks for bio inputs and biocontrol to support the growth of the industry. So welcome again, everybody, and we'll get started now with the first question for all the panelists. The first question will be the same for everybody, and then after the sessions, the first question we will take any doubts or question you have from the audience. So to start, we would like you to explain to us how are biocontrol products regulated in your region? Are the regulations the same as for conventional, or if are not the same, how are they regulated and treated? And I'm happy to welcome on the stage the first speaker, Maria Trainer.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for having me. It's a real honor and privilege to be here speaking with you all today. It's great to meet so many new people and to say hi to some old friends as well. So again, thanks for the invitation. As introduced, I'm with the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. We're the statutory authority in Australia responsible for regulating agricultural chemicals and veterinary medicines. Under our legislation, colloquially referred to as the AgVet Code, any agricultural chemical product or veterinary medicine has to be authorized or registered by us before it can be manufactured, sold, or used in Australia. Before we register a product or approve an active or authorize its use under permit, we have to be satisfied that it meets certain specific legislative criteria. And I put these up on the slide here. So these are that it must be safe, it must be efficacious, it mustn't pose an unacceptable risk to trade, and it must carry an acceptable label with appropriate directions for safe use. We break these legislative criteria down into the risk assessment areas listed on the slide. So we have chemistry, manufacture safety, toxicology in human health, residues and trade, worker safety, environmental safety, and efficacy and target safety. It's probably broadly similar to the various risk assessment areas you'd find in most regulatory agencies. So to answer the first question, our legislation doesn't treat biologicals any differently in principle to conventional chemistries. If a product meets the definition of an agricultural chemical product, it's an agricultural chemical product regardless of the nature of the chemistry. However, and this is where our legislation differs a bit from a lot of our overseas counterparts, we don't have prescriptive data requirements for any of our chemistries. So our legislation tells us that we must be satisfied that the product meets the statutory criteria, but it gives us broad discretion as to how we are satisfied, which means that we can tailor the data requirements to the properties of the chemistry in question. So as such, while we provide general guidance to applicants on data requirements for biologicals, we don't generally provide specific guidance outside of a formal process, because ultimately the answer usually is, well, it depends. It depends on the properties of the substance in question. So I guess I'll step back as well and define what we mean by a biological product, because although it's not defined in our legislation, we do have guidelines for registering biologicals that are on our website. So for us, a biological agricultural product is one where the active constituent is or is derived from a living organism. There are a few notable exceptions to that. First of all, products that, despite being biologically derived, have direct toxicity to the target species, so things like nicotine, strychnine, ivermectin. We treat those as conventional chemistries. We also have in the regulations a number of substances that, while they meet the definition of an agricultural chemical product, are actually exempt, and this would include things like predatory insects, predatory mites, and macroscopic parasites, which are all exempt from our legislation. So as I said, we do have published guidelines on our website, and I've got a screenshot of what the opening page looks like on our website that provides some information on how we regulate biologicals in Australia. Admittedly, they could be more visible on our website, and admittedly, they could be easier to follow. On my to-do list is updating the guidelines and updating the website, but unfortunately, it's one of these things that I never seem to have the resources to do. But it's on the list, and one day we'll get done. So we provide some general guidance on the data requirements, but as I said, it really does depend on the chemistry in question. So we break biologicals down into 4 broad groups. Group 1 are substances that have indirect toxicity or modifying effects on the target species. So this would include things like pheromones, hormones, growth regulators, enzymes, vitamins, those kinds of things. Group 2 are unpurified or partially purified extracts from plants or other organisms, so things like essential oils and plant extracts. Group 3 are your microbial agents, so your bacteria, fungi, viruses, protozoa, etc. Macroscopic organisms can also fall into this category if they aren't explicitly exempt under the regulations. And then group 4 is the umbrella catch-all group that if it's not in one of the other groups, it's in that one. So that captures things like plants that have been modified to incorporate a gene that encodes for pesticidal activity and those kinds of things. As I said, the data requirements really are dependable upon the properties of the substance in question. But most of the studies we'd expect to see for a conventional chemistry are not necessarily studies we would expect or want to see for a biological. We ask that applicants come in, or potential applicants come in and talk to us as early as possible in the R&D process to talk about what their product is going to be and what the properties of it look like, so we can work with them to come up with a set of data requirements that will align, that will allow us to evaluate the specific risk of that substance, but align regulatory effort to that risk, so they're not generating studies and data that are irrelevant to the risk assessment, essentially. We'll also consider scientific arguments to waive studies that if we think a study is required and an applicant doesn't, we'll consider a robust scientific argument in place of a study if that's appropriate. But where we do require further testing, we do try to really focus the requirements on the relevant exposure routes for the product in question, again, to make sure that we're not asking for data that we don't actually need or that's irrelevant to the risk profile of the organism or biological compound in question. I should mention as well that we will consider risk assessments and evaluations conducted by comparable regulatory authorities overseas. So if you have a product that's registered in a comparable overseas regulatory jurisdiction, then we would, and you have access to all of the underlying data that support that registration, you could come to us with the underlying data and the evaluations from that overseas regulator, and we wouldn't need to do necessarily a de novo evaluation of the entire data package. We would essentially do a peer review of that evaluation to make sure that it fits the Australian context and use pattern, and would only need to do targeted Australian-specific risk assessments where needed. Usually those are in the area of focal species assessments because of the unique flora and fauna that Australia has, but it will be a much more targeted set of data requirements. And before I end, the other thing I want to flag, and I haven't touched on it at all here, is in Australia we do have quite stringent biosecurity requirements, and so it is required that you get a biosecurity import consent from the Department of Agriculture before you can get a biological product registered in Australia. We don't administer the biosecurity import process, But I am aware that it is a potential regulatory challenge for a lot of companies looking to come to Australia. So I'm really keen to discuss either here or offline, grab me in the corridor, what we as a regulatory agency might be able to do to try and reduce some of those barriers and make it a little easier to navigate the biosecurity import process as well. So with that, I'll hand back to the chair, but happy to take questions later.
Thank you very much, Maria. And also, you mentioned something that I believe made everybody in the audience excited about the peer review of evaluation made in other jurisdictions. And I'm sure we will touch base on that later. Carlos, may I invite you on stage to enlighten us with the Brazilian framework?
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I put all these key messages at once because one leads to another to understand how Brazil has succeeded in these past few years to lead the adoption for biocontrols in the world. First, the most important one, although it's kind of contradiction because we are blamed to be the worst and the latest, to have a chemical approved in Brazil. The past few years, we're down from 12 to 8 years to have a chemical pesticide approved in Brazil, using the same law with the same decree, doing the adjustments for the biocontrols. We are running for biological and conventional in 442 days from the request to register, so 1 year and 4 months. And for organic, 121 days from request to the registers. And then people ask, when Brazil did that? Well, we did this customization for the regulatory process in 2005, 2006. So it's not new. It's almost 20 years ago. But what we did that at that time? Mainly removing the requirement for MRLs and for technical product, as a technical product, as you know, insects and a lot of other biological controls cannot have a technical product. So back at the time, we already identified that we could not succeed registering biologicals if we treat them as a chemical ones. And all the regulation worldwide was built up for chemical ones. So we did this changing almost 20 years ago. We have a dedicated staff to perform the analysis. This is a very important one. And another one that I know the Europeans are going to ask about that. We have the government, the legal authority to fast track the biological ones. This is the two main points that Brazil has used to have, by this day, if I'm not wrong with my team here, 662 products registered in Brazil. Almost 75% of these products came in market between 2008 to now. So you see, even with promote regulatory adjustment, the market takes some time to adopt, implement, and have some registers in the field. Then we have the governmental incentives. The first time was last year with the credit, the official credit. We can have a bonus for the farmers who can prove that they are using bioinputs in their production. Another very important thing for our scenario to understand what's happening in Brazil is the third line. It's a demand driven by the farmers. Mainly, a lot of aspects. MRLs, trade barriers, yes, but one of the mainly is when we had in 2012, 11-12, a major outbreak for Helicobacter parmigera. I don't know the common name for this armyworm. And one of the most important solutions provided at that time was Bovaria baciana and metarhizium. That started the hunger in the farmers to, oh, it's possible to use biocontrols. We just need to make them available for the farmers. That's the fourth line. Don't force farmers to use it. Promote the technology. We are in how you promote the technology, made them available. Do your analysis as required as a government, be as tough as you can, but that's the right one. That's what you need to guarantee the safety, the safeness in the environmental, and in Brazil we do it the efficacy. So do that, promote the technology, and the farmers are using it. We have this, as everyone has in our country, oh, the farmers that are like to spray and kill, etc. But we passed that. We are already beyond that, so I know that the Brazilian companies here, they know they can, you don't need to trust me. You don't go to Brazil and see that. If you knock a door of a farmer in Brazil, if you don't have a bio product to sell to them, they're probably gonna not listen to you because they want bio solutions. It's not a contradiction. It's to understand that a country who has the three major crops, soybean, corn, and maize, being produced with 99 and 98% for GMO crops, are using biological products. They want the best practices, most sustainable one, most profitable one, to have more yield and more profitable crops. And, as I promised, we are going to probably be the first country to do a full transition the requirements. And the new law we call bio inputs because when the regulation was built up in the 70s and the 80s worldwide, we didn't have the technology that we have today. So we cannot blame the legislation. We need to adapt for the new, as for example, RNA. How are we going to register RNA technology? It's a challenge. Technology that can provide both at the same time, crop protection and nutrition. How you register that? How you can claim the aspects? Oh, as here and all other countries, you register as a fertilizer and whispers in the ears. Oh, but it's working as crop protection. No, we want to change that. We want to see officially products being registered as both as crop protection and nutrition. So we're expecting that law to be in place soon because it depends on the parliament, but as we're expecting by the end of this year. It's customized especially for that. Biofertilizers, biological control, even products for animal health. We have some products for animal health, biological ones, and we can have all of them with new concepts, more, especially for biostimulants. That's the most hardest one to harmonize internationally. What is biostimulant for each country varies greatly. So that's what I'm expecting, and my key points to start the conversation.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and we really hope that you can share the good news with us by the end of the year that the new law for bio inputs is in place, and many more will follow then in other geographies, I'm sure. Madison, can I ask you to go on stage and give us an overview of the activities of the Biopesticide Pollution and Prevention Division, please?
Carlos is hard to follow, or is it Brazil's hard to follow? So. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madison Lee. I'm the director of the Biopesticides and Pollution Prevention Division at the EPA, or the United States Protection Agency. I feel very honored to participate in the esteemed panel for the leaders across the globe. We hope to learn a lot from each other today, actually, where Brazil is succeeding, where the EU is facing some challenges, where Australia has come to an understanding how to bring things through. We're going to learn from them, see what we can adopt here at the U.S. as well. I'm here also to represent USDA and FDA, which is very difficult. That's two other regulatory agencies, so I'll do my best to provide an overview of their regulations as well. So before I start, I want to ask this question of the crowd. Vou become escuta chocolata. For those who didn't understand, including the Swiss, where can I get your good chocolate? Belgium? Uh-oh. It's going to be a debate here. You tell me? Okay, I'm going to get your name. Okay, I'll be serious. I'll start. So in the United States, a web of laws and regulations address a range of biological products that exist to ensure safety of the public and the environment. Some of the U.S. laws were originally written to regulate chemical products, as Ali said, but over time has evolved to focus largely on biologicals. I'll let you know how that's evolved over time. In the U.S., we operate under a coordinated framework. So as I mentioned earlier, EPA, USDA, and FDA all work together to regulate biological products. Under the framework, we cover a full range of plants, animals, microorganisms, including biotechnology products. I met a lot of you on the hallway today, and you didn't realize that all of your products are regulated within the U.S. and specifically within the EPA. So anything that's a biologic control, which encompasses a lot of different products, anything that is biological of origin, synthetically derived, or gene edited, or a GMO of any kind, that all goes through the EPA. So if any of you guys are wondering, you've never met me, you should meet me today. So make sure that you guys understand the laws that are in the U.S. So I'm going to take a little time to just go over briefly what FDA and USDA do first, and then I'll give you a quick overview of the EPA. So FDA is responsible for the protection and promotion of public health. They regulate under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or FFDCA, and the Public Health Service Act, PHS, which together govern the safety of food, most foods and humans, and feed for animals, including they manage the veterinarian piece of it, so animal drugs is a big deal for them. They also implement any tolerances that EPA establishes for food and feed. USDA, which is structured in two big groups, they are responsible for protecting agriculture from pests and diseases and operate under the Plant Protection Act, PPA, and the Animal Health Protection Act, AHPA. USDA APHIS Plant Protection and Quarantine regulates plant pests, biological control organisms, associated articles. A USDA permit is required for the importation, interstate movement within states, and continued curation. There is a number of exemptions from the USDA permitting that I'll go over in a bit. USDA also has what's called the biotechnology regulatory services that regulates the importation, interstate movement, and environmental release of modified microorganisms and arthropods that may pose a plant pest. At the EPA, we operate under the Fungicide, Insecticide, Rodenticide Act, or FIFRA, and we are responsible for protecting human health and the environment, and regulate the distribution, use, and sale of pesticides for the use for pest control. We also regulate, which a lot of people don't know, but pesticide intermediates, which are considered new chemicals, and they're regulated under the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA. If you land over there, you want to come talk to me, because it's a little tricky over there. We also establish, under FFDCA Section 8, the tolerances and exemptions for pesticide residuals in food and feed. As I mentioned earlier, FDA implements or enforces on those tolerances. So I'm just going to go through very briefly a list of what we consider biopesticides. So for us, it's grouped into three categories. First, it's the biochemical pesticides, and that includes anything that's naturally occurring or synthetically similar. We also include naturally occurring microbial pesticides, which includes fungi, protozoa, bacteria, and viruses. And we also do all of the evaluation for emerging technology, or better known as biotechnology. That's any microorganism or insects or animals that are modified genetically or not. PIPs are another one, and I think Carlos just mentioned sprayable DSNRA. We also regulate that. Here's where we won over maybe Brazil, and then we're keeping score. We did register the first sprayable NRA product, Calanthia, in the U.S., and that has gone over very well, we've heard. And so in closing, I do want to just read to you a White House statement. So I think we mentioned a lot here today regarding climate change and the global issues that has impacted across the world. And so the White House issued what's called the White House Climate Resilience Game Changers Assessment. When I read this statement, that's very applicable to everyone here. Advanced agricultural biotechnologies, which include, in this definition, biopesticides, biocontrols, all of the products that you're making. These technologies can provide a transformative boost for farmers, ranchers, and foresters seeking to enhance the resilience of their plants and animals to increase temperatures, drought, new diseases, other stresses resulting from climate change. However, and this is underscored, widespread adoption will require additional work to develop clearer paths to market and more streamlined science-based regulatory regimes. So I think that's really the theme today with all of our agencies. We are all resource limited. We are all struggling to manage the workload before us. We see a really great, huge uptick of applications and interest, and the science is moving faster than the regulations, which is a great thing, but when you don't have resources, it's very difficult. So we are this year focused on the global regulatory framework, where we can learn from our sister agencies. We will adopt those. You will see me more traveling the world this year just to learn from all the countries and see what we can do to bring it back to the U.S. and adopt those best practices. So with that, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Madison. And if I might say, we are very glad to hear that the political desire, at least, is aligned in all the countries. As you know, there has been a new parliament in Europe, and one of the things that was stressed in the missions letter to the new commissioners was also the here to push or facilitate new biocontrol solutions. So to see that there is a global understanding that biocontrol solution and bioinputs in general can help us face some challenges is very reassuring for us. Thank you again. And next on stage, can I ask you, Salyu, to go to the stage and talk to us about the very complex situation in the 55 countries you represent.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are, if there are some who are watching online. Thanks for inviting me for this podium. And I want to talk about the situation in terms of harmonization of plant protection products in Africa. We are dealing, indeed, as you said, with a very complex situation in Africa where we have about 55 member states, each of them having its own procedures, its own policies. What is true for one country is not necessarily true for the other. However, in as much as the situation is complex, there are some attempts, some positive notes. Some countries are good, have sort of like success stories that can be, scaled out, both at national level, and that could be also happening at regional level. But I have to mention that we don't have a continent-wide framework for the registration of pest control products, including biopesticides. So I was mentioning that many RECs, RECs means regional economic communities. In Africa, the African Union recognized 5 of them, okay, in northern, west, central, east, and south. So we have, for instance, ECOWAS, which is for West Africa, EAC for East Africa, and then we have SADC for Southern Africa and ECAS for Central Africa. So in these RECs, we have some form of joint harmonization procedures. In West Africa, for instance, they had a committee called Committee Saheli and the Pesticide, which evolved to become something called now COHP. So the countries came together and with experts who meet once in a while to regulate, pesticide registration. And it is in the same process that they also regulate for biopesticide. Just like Australia, just like many countries, there is no specific differentiation between pesticide and biopesticide, in a sense that they are all pest control products. But it is true that there is some requirement that are specific to biopesticide because they don't have that spectacular way of action compared to chemical pesticide that have this knockdown effect that farmers like to see. And you know, seeing is believing. And therefore, there is the cutoff of mortality or efficacy that is required for biopesticide, and one has to demonstrate it with data. And in some countries, we have what we call Agricultural Technology Clearing Committee, ATCC. That's the case for Malawi. In Kenya, they have what they call Pest Control Product Board, PCPB. All these entities are sitting together with a board, with biologists, statisticians, toxicologists, entomologists, phytopathologists. All those people sit together to evaluate dossiers. And if you are a private company that want to register a product, you have to, first of all, prove that in the laboratory that, you know, it is working, it is killing. So you have to have data for that. And then also, you have to be able to demonstrate in the field validations. And these field trials, depending on countries, could be either multi-seasonal, so you have to do the experiment for several seasons, or you have to do it combined with several agroecological zones. And you can see in Africa that sometimes you have several agroecological zones in one country. You have a forest area, highland, lowland, littoral, etc. So you have to make sure that you have data in all those places and make an evaluation of your technology, constitute a dossier, be able to demonstrate that it is safe to human, safe to the environment, non-toxicity, do studies like compatibility, temperature, as well as many data as possible. And for biopesticide, indeed, you need to be able also to include in the aspects of Nagoya Protocol, because these are, you know, living organisms. They can be isolated in one country and introduced in a new country. You have to be able to genotype it. Okay, sometimes they will ask that you show us that if this is a metarhizium that was isolated from DRC, how do you want to commercialize it in Kenya, and proving to us that it's not going to cause any risk? And these are issues that usually are discussed, but nevertheless, some product manage to make it to the shelves. Now, talking about the number of countries that are actually involved in this process of harmonization or registration of pesticide, we have about 93 countries. But as I said, in Africa, you have some countries that belong to several regional economic zones. Let's say, for instance, the case of DRC. It's part of Central, it's part of East, it's part of South. So there are, in any initiative that happens in each of those regions, that country is part of it. So some countries are somehow, we can consider them as blessed and quite advanced. But there are countries that are only in one particular one, and I already mentioned the case of the West Africa, the WAPREC or the COHP procedure. So harmonization system at the continental level remain fragmented, and given the fact that country level integration varies from one place to another. That's a fact. We have conducted a study in partnership with CABI, and a lot has been actually, that study has enabled us to understand in what way we should approach a continental-wide framework for harmonization for the registration of pesticide and biopesticide, in one word, of pest control product and perhaps biosolutions. That's what we should say. So there's another slide, please, if, all right. Oh, thank you. Now, talking more forward-thinking, proactively, not complaining about the situation that's already happening, is that we thought that we needed to think of something that could be hosted within the framework of our office, which is the Inter-African Phytosanitary Council. We could think of establishing a specialized technical committee that will be governed by the member states, because we have 55 member states with a national plant protection organization. We can bring in resources in terms of experts, in terms of information, data scientists, entomologists, phytopathologists, all those. And that technical body will basically do analysis of the different procedures that actually exist in the different countries, come up with an harmonized one. And there could be a steering committee that meets maybe once a year to discuss on maybe burning dossiers. Because in as much as Africa is big with several agroecological zones, we have about a 30 million landmass. That's huge. And a population of about 1.5 billion. If you want, it's a big market. If we have such a panel, which means that if one product is recognized in one country, it's automatically recognized in another country with the principle of equivalence, and also with the context of Africa free trade area that is currently taking place. So on the other hand, on the flip side, then it also allows millions of farmers, if you consider that 60% of the population lives in the rural and are occupied by agriculture, they will be able to access to good technology, good solutions, and increase their yield and competitive yield that can go also for trade. So that is the effort that we actually are trying to do, and this is also what justifies our presence here. And I also wanted to mention that these technologies, there is also another very important aspect. It is that it's beautiful to put beautiful policies out there, but the most important thing is that farmers to be able to use them. Because how do you convince really a farmer to spend maybe, quite significant amount of money to use biosolution if at the end of the day he is going to sell at the same price as the person who is using conventional methods? So at the end of the day, they have to make a living. So that is now that element also that needs to be enforced. We need to create that awareness among the farmers, the extensionists, and make sure through this process of lobbying within the member states at the Phytosanitary Council, we can raise awareness and make sure that at the end of the day, such kind of inter-African kind of platform for harmonization and registration of chemical pesticide find its meaning in enhancing agricultural productivity and also enhancing trade, which is one of our mandate at the African Union. So a lot to say, but I prefer to stop it here and then I'll respond to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. It's an amazing objective that you have of trying to harmonize so many different countries with different regulations among themselves. And I think maybe you can chat later with Eric and Domenico, because even in Europe we have one legislation and there are some harmonization problems, so they can share their experience with you and give you some advice maybe. And talking about Eric, may I invite you on stage to give us an overview of Europe? Thank you.
So you are stealing my first words. So see, I feel you. I feel your pain. 93 countries. Wow. We have only 27. Well, and soon maybe 28 again or more. But actually, this is indeed a challenge to regulate whatever policies in the EU. But it's also a good opportunity. And thank you for the invitation. Indeed, I'm replacing a lot of my people in the hierarchy here today, but I'm very pleased to exchange the good practice with the people that we are actually meeting from time to time at the OECD, at FAO, etc. But never talk about what are you exactly doing, because that's the reality. We are not knowing really well each other. But okay, so the regulatory framework for the biocontrol in the EU is complex. And I force myself to put biocontrol in the title because it's pleasing this audience. This is not existing because we do not really make a distinction in our regulatory framework between the categories or the groups of biocontrol. So we are making the only difference which is existing is between microorganisms and chemicals. And within the chemicals, we have also the semiochemicals, the plant extract, the botanicals, the RNA, the peptide, all the novelties that are coming in the market are actually dealt under the concept of biopesticide and actually dealt with one regulatory framework only. We are not regulating at EU level the microbials and the beneficials, so the macroorganism, if you wish. These are regulated at member states level. And so the basic substance that we have as a top group actually are complementing the group of biocontrol we can consider that we have in the EU. Basic substance, what are they? Food, fertilizer, that the main function of which is not to protect plants, but may also deliver some services to the plant protection. So the EU regulatory framework is also not dealing with plant biostimulant, which are dealt with fertilizer regulation. So we have a lot to learn from you, Carlos, because if we could have all this group of things that we all regulating more or less, we could indeed talk about bioinput. This is, for me, a first lesson from this discussion for sure. But anyway, so we are regulating really the full chain of actually use and placing on the market and use of the plant protection product. And there are three main regulatory texts. The first one is Regulation 1107, which is actually regulating the placing on the market of this. So if you wish, there we have the group of microorganisms and the rest. But we have in the chemicals, indeed, some data requirements which are different for the microorganisms and the chemicals. And within the chemicals, we can indeed waive data, or actually this is a possibility that exists according to a problem formulation approach. So meaning, according to the biology, the ecology, the properties of those other chemicals than the synthetic one, actually we can adapt the data requirement and even the uniform principle. So we have data requirement for microorganisms and approval principle and uniform principle for microorganisms as well. They are specifically established in our regulatory framework under the Regulation 1107. So this to sell pesticide to user. And then we have another directive which is actually regulating the use. So how to use properly the plant protection product, what kind of application equipment, what kind of specific user may use this and that category of product. And then at the end of the pipe, we have also control on the residue. And I must say also that hopefully for the biopesticide group, most of the time we can exempt the MRL settings. So that's hopefully remaining like this. So to sell actually pesticide treated to the consumer. Pesticide treated food products to the consumer. So the organization of Regulation 1107 provides for two steps procedure. One step which is happening at EU level and which is the approval of the active substance. And the review and the authorization of the plant protection product is actually carried out at member states level. First, the active substance. So the important actors and the institution in this are actually rapporteur member states that an applicant, a manufacturer is choosing, is going with a dossier which is established according to a data requirement. And as I said, for microorganisms, we have specific data requirement. They present their application. There is a first assessment of this dossier. And then at EU level, EFSA, or Food Safety Authority, is organizing a review by the pairs, so the peer review of this dossier in order to prepare conclusions. Conclusions which are actually defining whether or not this active substance is compliant with our approval criteria. And then finally, we have to take the decision. And so the two persons in charge of this preparation most of the time are in this room, Domenico, myself, generally speaking. So we prepare or we propose to the vote of the member states to approve or non-approve an active substance. So this for the active substance. But then for the plant protection product, it remains under the responsibility of the 27 member states to deliver this after. So the plant protection product containing those active substances are actually authorized according to common rules, which are called uniform principle, but delivered by member states. They are an organization in zone and mutual recognition possibility, but all of you will say it's not working well. So this is also well recognized, and we need to improve that. And we need to improve despite the fact that the statistics are not so bad. Since 10 years, we actually have an increase in terms of approved active substance which belongs to this group by 125%. So it's not so bad for the EU, but indeed, this corresponds to 69 approved microorganism strains, for instance, several plant extracts, etc., etc. But okay, we have only 900 authorized microorganism-based plant protection products. It's not so bad. It's not 2,000 like in the US, but okay, that's something. Well, finally, I would like to say also that to illustrate my first introduction, we have policy to push out certain synthetic chemicals, and we have policy to pull the biopesticide into the market. Unfortunately, this remains political will at the moment, and it's not fully realized. And this is to which what we are working on by all means. And today, maybe we will learn how to do it better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and also for leaving us with the hope that the political will, and the reminder that the political will is there. I would like to ask you all one question, given your experience with biologicals in the geographies now. How do you see biological scaling up in the next 5 years, and what will be the implications on your structures, and how can we support? But maybe we'll keep it that for later. So you think more about how we can help you as an industry, and you can just give us a glimpse in the next 5 years future for biologicals. Yes.
Okay, this is a tricky one for me because in Australia, we don't see a great deal of new biologicals. We see a few registrations of variations on a theme for existing biologicals, but we don't generally see new biopesticides or biologicals coming into Australia. And as I alluded to earlier, I'm really curious to explore why that might be. I have some thoughts myself as to why that might be, but I'd be really interested if folks want to take me aside or during the Q&A, share some thoughts about that, because it's a challenge for us. So I'd really like to be in a position where I could talk about scaling up biologicals in Australia, but right now I'm looking at what can we do to get more biologicals into Australia. But thinking conceptually about some of the other types of technologies that we're seeing coming down the pipe, I think we're starting to see some new and innovative technologies that I think might challenge our regulatory frameworks in ways that we haven't been challenged in the past. Not in bad ways, things like with RNAi, how do we define the active constituent? For us, an active constituent is a single chemical. If we're talking about an RNAi product that maybe has multiple sequences within the same formulation, is each one of those sequences a separate active constituent? Do we have to approve each one separately, or can we come up with a definition that allows for a variation of sequences that fit within a certain set of parameters that allow for resistance mitigation within a single formulation? Platform approaches. if you've got a double-stranded RNA product, can you mix and match within certain parameters the way you can with potentially a vaccine? Our legislation doesn't really imagine that kind of approach. I think we can do it, but I'm not 100% sure. It's going to be really interesting to work through some of these innovative technologies with our existing regulatory frameworks and see what we can do within the existing legislation and where we are going to need new legislation or changes to the legislation in order to make these innovations easier to get to market. We don't have concerns from a risk perspective, we just have concerns with making them fit the legislation that we've got, because it's a lot easier to try and fit something to the legislation we've got than to try and change the legislation. As anybody knows, it takes a lot of effort to try and change legislation, unless there's a real political will, and then suddenly you can do it in 5 minutes. But that doesn't generally happen, and if that's your legislation, it's usually not happening for good reasons. So, and yeah, I think the other thing I've noted as well, I think as we start to see more and more biologicals come to market, and I'm really hoping this happens in Australia, we get a lot of new companies coming and interacting with the regulator who aren't necessarily used to interacting with the regulator. And that can pose challenges in terms of the quality of the dossiers that are developed and the advice that we as regulators provide to companies. So I think it's a two-way street, making sure that we are meeting the needs of an emerging audience, an emerging set of companies that aren't used to interacting with us, and making sure that we're providing training opportunities and better guidance material than we're currently providing to meet the needs of industry. But also it's a two-way street, making sure that we're getting industry coming to us and telling us what you need so that we can serve you better.
Thank you very much, Maria. Carlos.
For Brazilian market, we just scratched the surface. We're getting bigger and better each year because, as I said, it's driven by the farmers. As they are asking, they are traditionally unlimited hunger for innovation. So the farmers are asking, can I use bio with chemical? Which one? In which way? Can I combine technologies? So they are asking for providing new solutions. I will still provoking the audience of all the companies. I see Biocontrol here. We are still waiting for a bioherbicide being registered in Brazil because it's a huge importance for us. More than half of products in Brazil are insecticides, so we have a lot of potential being there to be explored. Mainly because we are still stuck in a, sorry to say that, but it's a very primitive discussion, registered or not registered. The market is way beyond that. How you're going to position your products is going to be, you have a better, you can assist the farmer, have a better price, a better position. So for Brazilian farmers are way beyond that. It's not about the register. Okay, it's registered, and so I know that's safe and it's going to work, but it's not enough. It's far beyond to be enough. So the farmers are looking for the solutions, how they're going to scale up their production. How are you going to help the farmers to increase their yield, be more sustainable, more decarbon their production? So that's the question that they are waiting to hear from the companies. And that we should target in Brazil. The other aspect that's we need to understand is that we are transitioning from the chemical for the biological one. And it's far beyond be easy. It's complex. It's highly complex, the regulation. We did some customization, but we know that's complex. We do a lot of press submission that we mentioned in May when we have a meeting with DG Santé. It's still valuable to have a pre-submission meetings between the regulatory level and the companies to try to understand how that product can be fit in the regulation to sake of their private money and our efforts, our budget, our official budget to analyze that, to not be redundant and over analyzing same products. So we need this approach with the private sector, with the academy, how it's working the regulatory aspects. It's in the right way. We are asking these right questions. We are analyzing correctly. So this approach with the bio is needed. For the chemical ones, everybody knows what is a herbicide, an insecticide. This is known. But the biological one, we are building up knowledge between all the sectors. So for scaling up, we need this approach for everybody. Companies with the marketing understanding what the farmers are needing and asking to. With the government, how we can speak the same language to solve the problems that we are seeing and fixing that, as we saw biostimulants, it's hard to harmonize the concept. Even in Brazil, we have a lot of debates how we should treat biostimulants, but doing that, frankly, is speaking with the private sector and the government.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and I see you might be one step ahead on what's next, what needs to be done also by us as a sector. Madison, what do you think?
Thank you. Well, I think it's not 5 years from now, it's happening now. At least in the US, the volume has tripled, is going to quadruple in terms of the applications that we're seeing for, I'll say biocontrol, for the all-encompassing products that we're seeing. And so we know today that we have to adjust just to manage the workload that we see before us. I always tell my sad story about resources. I have enough to do about 30 new active ingredients a year. I have 80 pending, and I've met with many of you, and you are holding back submissions because you're waiting on us. So you have a queue that's quite long, that's ready to go. So we recognize this in the U.S., at EPA, USDA, and FDA, that we need to find a way to streamline our regulations, focus our limited resources on things that are of a concern, while those that are not, that have beneficial or have benefits like many of your products, find a way to exempt them or reduce the regulatory burdens. So in case those folks aren't aware, 3 categories are already exempt. For example, from EPA, USDA permitting, EPA-registered biopesticides are exempt. Organisms under EPA experimental use permits are exempt. And organisms granted an exemption by EPA are also exempt from USDA permitting. That's very huge, and some people aren't aware that that exists today. We're trying to apply that across to the modified microorganisms with USDA's BRS. That's what we've been doing this past year, to find agreements that we can leverage each other's expertise. If we did the eco assessment, maybe they don't have to do it, vice versa. And that's what we're trying to learn from our the other countries here. If we are able to compare what do they assess, and if it parallels with what we do, we might be able to find a way to either delegate it or accept it or find a streamlined way forward. So those are the adjustments that we are making. I've heard plant biostimulants referenced quite a bit. In this coming year, we'll be picking up a rulemaking to largely exempt the vast majority of plant biostimulants. And the 2 criteria that we're going to apply to it is biological in origin or synthetically similar. Second category is it's low risk, if you can demonstrate it's low risk, and then everything else will be exempt. So that rulemaking will codify what has been almost a 30-year conversation about what can the U.S. do about plant biostimulants. And for those who are aware, AFCO, which is a trade organization, passed what's called the model bill this past year, and they're trying to get each state to adopt that. We are going to take the definition from that as a starting point to have a uniform definition, and then from there apply the 2 criteria that I just mentioned. This is huge for this group or this industry because you guys are venturing into that quite a bit. So we have a firm commitment to do that this coming year, and I highly engage everyone to engage on that. Lastly, what I want to mention is we continue to figure out within the U.S. how do we focus on the right things. And so the biggest thing, and moving into the industry can help us, horizon scanning is very important to us. We're seeing a huge uptick of novel microorganisms that we've never seen before. Usually it's just another strain of BT, right? But here we're seeing novel microorganisms. We don't know, what the eco impacts may be. So the sooner you come and talk to us, the sooner you can show us what you have seen or your studies or anything you've seen in literature that will help us start to inform how do we build our risk assessments for something that novel. Anything in the gene-edited space is very challenging. We have a great team that is very versed in it. We also ask that that horizon scanning extends to biotechnology because it's very difficult. And to be honest, the public's very nervous about anything that's gene edited, even in the US. We are proponents of it, but there's still a group of folks that are very nervous. So we need to demonstrate that we're doing our job to protect the public. And of course, endangered species and, non-target organisms. So that's the key area that we want to focus on, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk to me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madison, and I'm sure everybody is happy to know that you are working to go back to reduce the timelines in the US, which was once our paradise to start our registration processes. Saliu, can you share your thoughts with us?
Yeah, thank you so much. Looking at numbers and facts, I tend to believe personally that there is a great future for biosolution, biopesticide, and everything that aligns with the concept of agroecological transition. We are actually in front of a revolution that is taking place almost at global level, with access to information, more awareness. It has appeared in the minds of many people in the world, and particularly in Africa, that we cannot continue to grow food the way we used to do back in the day. So we have to come back to new ways to produce food in a sustainable way. And that's where agroecology and biological control and all these environmentally friendly concepts of One Health, are gaining more momentum in the minds of people. Now, having said that, it means that there is more awareness being created, and this awareness is going to translate into policies that is going to follow. There is a population that is also growing in Africa. By 2050, it's estimated the continent will be having 2 billion people. And also, considering the more people who are in other sectors, more people moving into the cities, there will be as many people in the rurals as in the cities. It's already happening. So we will have more investment coming from non-producing, food-producing people into the agricultural sector. We will have to be growing our own food, even if you are in an office. So there will be that drive that will force now people to adopt more biopesticide. From our perspective at the African Union, we are currently having an STC at the African Union. It means all ministers are meeting to discuss and to validate the next strategy for Africa, the next 10-year strategy, which is going to be, the Kampala Declaration. Remember, we moved from the Maputo to the Malabo. Now it's going to be in Kampala for the next 10 years. And in that strategy, there is a lot of emphasis in agroecology and agroecological transition. There's a lot of emphasis in growing food without depleting the natural resource base. There's a lot of emphasis in Africa free trade area, which means that there will be more trade within the continent. There's a lot of emphasis in youth employment. So one of the things that the private sector companies will have, for instance, as a great benefit if they choose, because I've seen that very few of them are actually active on the continent. They are mainly in Kenya or South Africa, but the rest of the 50 about countries are not really very active. So if we are able to create employment through the development of these biosolutions on the ground, then those solutions will be cheaper and accessible to many farmers. And if policy follows, making sure that there's an harmonized procedure, that technologies can be as accessible in Kenya as in many parts of Africa through the same procedure of registration, then we would have really cracked it, down. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saliu, and thank you for sharing the fact that agroecology is on the agenda for the meeting. So we see that it's a common topic, and we hope to see it coming to reality. Eric, would you like to share your thoughts on the scale-up of biologicals in the next 5 years and how we can help?
Yeah, what I see is indeed a huge potential, but we are not in the race to productivity, maybe as the farmers in Brazil. We are more in the race to sustainability, and that makes the difference. What we are actually trying to do is to shift the production practice from the purely synthetic chemical hazardous pesticide to the biopesticide. And biopesticide is one way to realize this. One way to realize this. I insist, we have a farm-to-fork strategy which is imposing a reduction of chemical pesticide. Personally, I was always opposing this policy because it's forcing. It's not forcing, it's promoting that we need. Promoting the farmer to accept this new technology. And unfortunately, we are not indeed so keen to innovation in Europe. Not the farming communities, but the consumer. Consumers are afraid by new things. And this is all fault, probably, or mistake in the regulation, because we are not explaining, we are not communicating rightly. The risk communication is not existing. We are always hiding behind our regulation, our regulatory framework. Yes, this is protecting you, don't worry, don't worry. But at the end, we miss opportunity, and okay, we are trading partners, but fine. If our consumer decided suddenly to say, we stop farming activities and we import everything from the outside, good for Brazil, good for the others. But we believe in this shift in order to accompany the race to sustainability that we engage into it since a couple of years. So that's, well, to set the scene. Now, how to help this? And we did all effort necessary to stimulate our expert. You know, we trained more than 450 experts to the risk assessment of microbial biopesticide. And this is, where are they? They are not yet assessing the dossier. They are not yet assessing the dossier. This is the reality. They're coming from the chemical risk assessment, and they are not yet converted to the religion of biopesticide. This is like this, and I'm afraid this will remain like this until the moment they realize that the wealth is dry to synthetic chemicals. No companies will continue to send synthetic chemicals into the process because they realize this is not what the society, at least in Europe, wants. They want solutions which are more sustainable. So again, fitting with our objective of the farm to fork, more sustainability in the farm production. And I think this is perfectly compatible with what we are doing. But until the moment, it did not realize because we are deprived from the working force which are able to absorb the flow. Even, well, we are diverting the companies from applying into Europe because there is no capacity to absorb. This is the best in class member states and teams in Europe. They have to refuse dossier, not because they don't feel expert enough, no, because they have enough dossier to handle for the moment. So that's the reality. And so I hope that this reality will change over time because, as I said, the pipeline for synthetic chemicals will turn dry, for sure. I'm pretty sure. The future is with biopesticide. Klaus Behrendt, my dear director, was telling you probably in Brussels, the future is with biopesticide. So I'm very confident this will be the case. And now to realize this, we need indeed to adapt our procedure, to maybe change our regulatory framework, maybe to turn people more in the business, to think about how to integrate this, to communicate to farmers, because this is, and I share what Xiaolu was saying, indeed, this is important to communicate right. And also companies, please think to position your product in plant protection practice. That's important. So that's how I see the bright future of biopesticides, biocontrol agents in the EU, even in the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you to all the speakers. And I think it's interesting to hear that also some of the common challenges are about availability of resources, internal resources, to keep up with the number of applications that are being submitted. And I'll just mention here, before we open the floor to questions, what Maria said at the very beginning about maybe peer reviewing assessments done by acceptable regulatory jurisdictions could be a way to streamline or ease some of the burden on our resources globally. And that said, it's now time to receive questions from you. I'll kindly ask you to raise your hand, and before asking the question, please present yourself with your name and affiliation.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Fabio. I'm from Brazil, independent consultant. So thanks for the good presentation. So I have heard here that one of the demand is to speed up the process. That's going to help the private sector, but also the farmers at all. And I also hear here that there is a lack of resources, people to analyze the process. So is there any initiative in any part of the world to use like technologies like artificial intelligence to speed up the process? I'm not saying the work that you do is not important, but it can help a lot. And I wonder if that makes sense, and just want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much. I recently learned during the TCRPPO in Panama with other counterparts who are also representing, the respective countries. I'm naming EPO, NAPO, COSABE, OIRISA. Some of the colleagues are using AI actually to evaluate, certain technology after they have provided initial data. So I think that procedure is there. I think there's a great deal with AI if it is governed very well. Everybody is afraid of it, including myself. But but I think if it's used wisely, it can really help speeding up. And talking about speeding up registration, there have been a situation where a country has faced a desert locust invasion. That was in East Africa. They suddenly did not expect it, but climate change happened and locusts arrived in the country. So they look at the whole repertoire of chemicals and pest control product. There was nothing to control desert locusts because they've never had it, for a very, very long time. So what happened? So they allowed, to give temporary kind of licenses for people to bring in new chemicals and then do the testing while the locusts are invading the country. And if it happened to work, then they register them. So that was a process of fast tracking. There's also another situation where there was a fall armyworm that came from South America to Africa, and a lot of countries were facing that problem. And what they did, they couldn't allow, for instance, the testing for 2 consecutive seasons, especially if the country has one rainfall. You cannot do testing over 2 years. So they allowed for multi-location trials, so to balance maybe the seasonal, repetitions. So those are cases of fast tracking that I'm aware of in terms of registration of products. And it's also worked for biopesticide as well.
Other questions?
Does this work? Yes, it works. So Lorraine Tilbury from ProEV. So reflecting on the comment from the colleague about AI, I was wondering, because I have a background in pharmaceuticals as well, and have you ever thought about talking to the initiatives that exist in the pharmaceutical world, because they actually have a public-private partnership going on currently that's called the Innovative Medicine Initiative, where they are using AI in a number of projects. It's very interesting. I encourage you to have a look. And they're using it to accelerate and improve, more efficient use of resources, do like a pre-sort of data, including pathology, using toxicology data with concurrent control animals. They've created virtual control groups. They're gathering all the data actually from all of the private sector, and they're using a third party to create this like compilation of all the data already out there, and then they're, from that mega database, they're finding all kinds of interesting patterns. So why not think about doing something like that?
So the U.S. is still running on Windows 7, I believe. But I do love the idea. I'll stop the jokes after this. But I do love the idea of some kind of a partnership. Actually, we started talking about, I think you've highlighted all the same things. The literature search, the studies, that upfront data is very important to inform our risk assessments. And where you guys can compile it, or through some agreement, you can help us compile it. I think that's the first step in where AI will help us tremendously. And that's in the near term, right? AI is here already. We just have to figure out how. We can't load it onto Windows 7. So if there was a way where you would capture it and then send it to us in a streamlined way, I think that's a practical way to implement it. So we're very open. I'll be happy to talk to you more if you have time after.
Sorry for giving the impression that I know it all.
But you do.
What I can say is that, you see, when you look at what is currently happening with AI, let's say you take a rock song and turn it into a reggae song. Take the lyrics of a rock song and turn it into a reggae song. You wouldn't like to do that in things like, I don't know if it happens in the medical field or in the agricultural field, but what I wanted to say is that you need at least some minimum of reliable data that you can maybe collect for a series of time. And then that data can be used as the way to do some kind of machine learning and come up with something that is certified. The whole thing is just about the governance of it, so that we don't put maybe people's life or people's yield at jeopardy in case that AI doesn't turn out to be trustworthy. So I think that is not something that we can exclude. But before you move into using AI, first of all, I think the most important thing is to have the biopesticide already winning the hearts of the majority of people, the farmers, the consumers, but also the policymakers. I think that's where the challenge is right now, in my opinion.
Any more questions from the audience? Please.
Good afternoon. This is Adam Sebesta from Roots Peterson. I'm a consultant in public affairs in Brussels. I have a question for Madison, but others feel free. I was wondering, Madison, with the uptake of biologicals, you mentioned 2,000 products available already in the US. What sort of data are you collecting on how this is transforming actually agriculture to a more sustainable model? How is this contributing to biodiversity? Do you have some examples of data that are able to maybe incentivize and motivate other farmers to uptake the technology, that it really is helping out and transforming us to a more sustainable model? Thank you.
That's why we have USDA. They have a whole office that does that, the policy office. So what they do is they collect market data, adaptability data, farmer data, and they create a report, I believe, annually on that. So what we're trying to do is they're trying to reach out specifically to industry to say what information would be helpful, and they can collect that data because they're the U.S. government. They can access a lot of databases that you can't. And then what outputs will be helpful to help inform you in your investments, and then particularly what you said, how does it help with biodiversity? How does it help with climate change? How does it help with food security, all of that. So yes, there's a whole office that manages that. I'm happy to give you the contact information to connect with them.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks very much for all the presentations. Fantastic. Jennifer Lewis from IBMA. Several of you have mentioned sort of looking at evaluations from other competent authorities. What, if any, role is there for sort of intergovernmental organizations or regional harmonization in addition to the African example? Are there more of these sorts of examples or intergovernmental agencies that could help here? And if so, how? Thanks.
Yeah, I think we will probably all have. I can start and yeah. So I think for us, one of the real benefits to an organization is having somebody to go and bounce ideas off of. If we, rather than having a single point of contact to consult on various initiatives and to get input on is much easier than going out to multiple different organizations separately. And that's when you're resource poor, being able to go out to one body rather than 50 different organizations is a real time saver.
Thank you. So I think given that you are talking about the safety of humans, the safety of animals and environment and also plants. So, we are driving now, quickly to the One Health concept. But again, this brings 4 ministries into play. Health is there, environment is in there, agriculture, and perhaps trade. So these 4 ministries perhaps can be bound by a certain number of acts. And I believe that one of them is probably Consumer Protection Act, whereby if you use biopesticides, you protect the consumers and protect the environment, the health of people and all that. So perhaps in a bigger framework, if you really want to escalate the whole matter, then that's where we bring all those guys together and the different agencies that are within those different ministries. I'm thinking of those who are involved into certification. There was a previous session where somebody was asking, why can't we have a certification on biocontrol, just like the way it is for organic? But the answer was that there's already IPM in which biocontrol is part of. But I mean, this is a whole debate that we could actually fuel in another symposium, maybe. Thank you.
I'm going to be a little skeptical for your answer, for your question. I not see that happen. Didn't happen with the chemical ones. Did not happen with pest risk assessment, because the government doesn't want let it go your requirements. I had to be skeptical with this history that we have. But it's not that we should keep trying that. Trying to be, at least find what we have in common with all these kind of regulations for the sake of the market, for the companies that has to play infinite amount of complex regulations in different countries. But I don't see that happen so soon. So we're going to have to find what can be done. Let's be honest, the gene editing is not going to work. And we are seeing gene editing way forward in the United States, Argentina, and Brazil. It's straightforward. For me, for Brazil government, gene editing is the high state of art for biocontrol. They can customize almost everything that we want to provide any kind of solution that we need for our production. For us, is the future. It's gene editing applied for biocontrol. That's a kind of, for example, a difference between what Eric said and we said. Brazilians strongly believe that it's not a trade-off between sustainability and productivity. It's a win-win situation using biocontrol. It's been sustainable as much as we can be productive, both ways. But we can find some kind of convergence on that. I hope so, especially on the topics like, as I said, gene editing, like RNA, how it's going to be. We have a lot of RNA products developed in Brazil. Not even in Brazil are being sold because how they're going to market it, IP solutions, etc. Gene editing, the problem is the IP, so it's the IP, how the companies retain value for their development. So I hope to have an answer for you soon, but I don't see that coming because we need a better open heart from the governments that we have seen the last decades.
If I can jump in, just to answer your question on a practical level, I think the U.S. is very open to it. Actually, we have a lot of existing registration applications where another country has already approved the product in some capacity. So I think, Jennifer, to answer your question directly, what can you do to help us? You can help us by understanding what was approved. You can release CBI, meaning the confidential business information. So the only way two countries or two agencies can access information that's confidential is either we have an agreement, it's usually called a memorandum of understanding, it's very difficult to get through, or the company can release the CBI. That means the company gives permission to both agencies or both countries to go ahead and the two countries or two agencies can share that information. That alone jumps over years of hurdles for legal agreements. So that's one thing that you guys could do on a practical level. After that, it would be wonderful, since you submitted the application and you know what was assessed, give us a comparison of what was assessed, what data, and the more homework that you do will help us do less later, right? And that will help streamline how we can use that information. We are very open, I think very similar to what Maria said. If it's a comparable country that has very similar standards, we're more than happy to find a way to bridge that. We're doing it now for many of those applications that we have in front of us because A, we don't have capacity, and maybe another country has a great way to approach it that we haven't looked at yet. So we're very open to learning and adopting. Whether it's going to happen tomorrow, I don't know, but we are actively doing that now, and we're happy to share the best practices if it works.
Well, I would give this to artificial intelligence robots. I give the 5 fellow panelists the same dossier to this artificial intelligence, and they have to deliver what are the best practice, and then to indeed build up some good practice. No, seriously, I'm very much more pragmatic, and we see this integration at the OECD, for instance, and that's an opportunity that we have to meet the people every year to discuss innovations, and next year we will have 1.5 days of seminars on risk assessment of new innovation in the biocontrol. So that's something that we need to be a bit more concrete than developing a guidance together. It's maybe exchanging, and I like this idea, and this is for me a home-taking message, a peer review of some critical for risk assessors, I mean, new innovation in this biocontrol area. We did it with RNI. We learned a lot from different sounds from different partners, but that's also feeding the process of becoming more experienced in this innovation, because we are deprived from expertise from time to time, we have to admit. So that's a good idea to have this integration. And I hope that we will continue this dialogue around in other sessions or later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are not taking any more questions because we are actually we had a tight stop 1 minute ago for the next session. But I would like to really thank you for coming and share your thoughts with us and your experiences. And it's been a pleasure to be on this panel with you. And to everybody, you will be here all day today. So if anybody has questions, they can reach out to you. If I may add one closing remark, during the day today we have seen a lot of experience from different stakeholders, governments, policymakers, legislators, but also farmers. And it seems that there is a want-want situation here. So I will say that we can see the light in front of a tunnel, because when we have a one-to-one situation from all the parties involved, then there is road for a win-win situation for biocontrol. Thank you.